This is Clip Studio Paint, where I'll be showing the rest of the tutorial. We would focus much less on certain character design principles you can find anywhere else, and focus a little bit more on drawing black characters based on like a facial structure and the skin tone, at least how I tackle them, and then you can apply that to your own work. So obviously we'll be focusing on the key elements of the face, the eyes, the nose, the mouth especially, as well as a little bit of their placement. I'll be giving a few examples, and I'll have one for a male, a female, and then a bigger person. These will kind of be my models as we play around with these facial features, the positions, and how I draw them specifically for black characters. Keep in mind that despite the little tweaks I do for these features, understand that regardless of the ethnicity of the character, they can have any of these features. They can have the pointiest of noses and still be a black character. You have that much freedom as an artist. These aren't necessarily rules, but these are things that I apply that make the character undeniably a black character. There are a lot of ambiguous characters like these in anime, manga, and just media in general. I know people like to have fun with Piccolo being black. I don't think that counts. So we're talking about black characters that are undeniable. But that doesn't mean these rules can't be broken. At the very least, more undeniable than others. So one of the key things, especially working well with my style, is to have a slightly wider nose, nostrils a little bit further apart, if your art style incorporates nostrils at all. And then when drawing the mouth, I try to draw the lines for the upper lip and lower lip. They're usually very defined. Again, could a non-black character have these features? Yes. But these are things that I like to have in place that make it a lot more undeniable, especially once we get to skin tones at the end. This is pretty normal, pretty basic, pretty default, but it will look more obvious, obviously, with the skin tones. Not to mention hair, which we won't touch as much in this video. I have several videos on my YouTube channel that touch on hair, and today I just wanted to focus a little bit more on the facial feature aspects of the character designs. Same rules applying here with the female character, but notice with the nose, these noses will tend to be less pointy, and the lips even more defined, especially if the character is going to be wearing lipstick. The shape of the eyes can take a lot of roles, a lot of ways. Understanding basic design principles with, all these features as well is with shape language. You can still be stylistic here and there, and shape language is essentially where there are more square shaped things that could symbolically mean that maybe the character is a little bit more reliable, has leadership roles and things of that nature. They're a square. A circle means they're a little bit more endearing. So if I drew really big round eyes, you would have seen that. And a triangle just means they're a little bit more cunning, especially if the triangle is upside down, but it's really those sharp edges, right? Principles like that, the silhouette test, the rules of threes, all those things still apply here, but we're just focusing more on the facial features for undeniably black characters. And you see this a lot in animation, where the lips are so defined, like they draw the whole thing for the upper lip, but for non-black characters, it's not there at all. So subconsciously, the audience is already trained to expect this to an extent. But again, you can break these rules. I'm just having you be a little bit more aware. For the female characters, the upper eyelashes tend to be thicker lined, just to have that sense of makeup. So even if it was a guy, if the guy had makeup on, that's what we would kind of do. And then you have little strokes for the lashes. Again, we're focusing less on how to draw as well, and just what these features are and what I'm thinking when I'm putting these together and how you can apply them to your own work. The bigger it got here, I have the nostrils even further apart. It's a wider nose. Avoid lips like these. There's a lot of historical context and insensitivity attached to it. So if you don't like Twitter drama, don't do this. Some people get away with it, but my advice is to just avoid. So we're showing you what to draw, but also what not to. Even if you wanted to draw bigger, fuller lips, you can still give it a little bit more here. So you see the lines to suggest the little curls for the upper lip, the curve and like the stretch and expansion for the lower lip, and even like a little line underneath to show that the mouth protrudes a little bit. There's a lot of fat in the cheeks, and so on. And then we have the eyes. Smaller pupil and iris now. You can experiment with all these things, and this will help give and bring more variety, not just to your style, but the characters in whatever you're creating. Experiment with the shapes, the eyes, nose, mouth, eyebrows, everything. And even when we get to hair, even with the hair, have fun. Everything else with like the ears, the bodies, those I don't actually think are different enough to bring up when it comes to drawing non-black characters. It's pretty much the same approach to drawing the rest of the body or the ear or, things like that. As you can see here, even if I drew a face that was a little bit more standard, that does not mean that the character isn't obviously black, especially when you add skin tones. But if you're able to tell even without adding skin tone, it's a good sign, and it's a stronger signifier that this is definitely a black character. You can see how it looks if we add the lines that I mentioned. Even if I don't connect it fully, you can see how it looks at least a little less than the others. But again, that doesn't mean you get the drift. Even with an art style that's a little bit more out there, you can still apply some of these techniques, as you can see. The nose being less pointy, fuller lips with more defined lower and upper lip lines. And with just those two things, it goes a long way. It goes even further if you have more lines to show the nostril and how slightly wider it might be. Again, I think our minds are primed, especially with the content we've consumed all these years, to see that and the connection and correlation it has to our real faces in real life. It just makes the character more undeniably black. There are no Twitter debates as to whether the character is black or not. Same approach here. Characters can look more and more different the more you experiment with each feature, but also the positioning of these. Right? The lips could be maybe lower than where you normally place them, and you can experiment to see how that would look. You can change certain parts of the shape of the head, like I have just here with the jaw. I'm going to reduce the lips a little bit, and then with the nose, again, just these U's on each side showing the nostril. That could be the way you draw the nose. That's one way. but I could complete it and have it be like a W type thing going on, and it still works. I think with black people, there's a lot more variety with how you draw the noses and the mouths, especially. But that doesn't mean all black people have noses like this and mouths like these. There's a lot of diversity, even in skin tone, which we will touch on. Just adding hair a little bit here. And I'll do the same for all the characters. But again, keep in mind, we're not focusing too much on hair in this video. I'm not really thinking about what these characters look like ahead of time, but I'm just having all these individual ideas for noses, mouths, and eyes, and just kind of mixing and matching and coming up with the characters you see. Now for skin tone, if you look at your screen, they're usually in this corner, and then when it comes to the square, I'm usually picking in the top left. The further down and the further centered for the more dark skin or black characters, and the further top left for the more lighter skin or white characters. And then experiment with the tones. Not all black characters will have the same tone. See, I've picked one here, and I've picked a darker skin for the lady here. And I'm leaving the lips because sometimes to show lipstick, it's easier to just put something on there, again, as part of makeup, and then you can experiment with a completely different color. And sometimes we fill in the upper lip black. That's another thing you'll see a lot of times with black characters, where the upper lip is shaded in a darker color than the lower lip, or just filled in black depending on the art style. And then we just continue to experiment with the skin tones. Again, you can just use real life reference so you're on point, and just make sure that you're not in a box. Similar thing here with his lip. I could leave it all one skin tone throughout, but sometimes you might want to have a lighter pink touch to the lips, just a lighter pink touch. And you might still shade in the upper lip. It's really up to you how you do it. As long as the end result looks like it works, then it works. I highly recommend you experiment with all these things. When it comes to hair, hair is another thing, even though we're not touching on how to draw specific hairstyles in this video. A lot of times with black characters, to make it undeniably black, sometimes people would draw the characters with black hair, the type of hair colors that you would naturally see on black people. Now, with anime characters, I don't mind breaking the rules even further here, because you see a lot of characters with all kinds of colors of hair in anime and manga. And so I don't want black characters to be left out just because you want the character to look definitely black, and you end up with just brown and dark toned hairs. If you want to throw in a pink, look, if Sakura can have pink hair, so can your character. Especially if it's a fantastical idea. You have that much freedom, and always be conscious not to be pigeonholed or put yourself in a box and limit your creativity. Even if it's still what you want to do, explore other ideas just in case. You see this a lot with the eye color as well. Again, if you want it to be definitely black, the eye colors for black people, you're not going to see too many blue-eyed characters that are black. Now, I do think it would be a little weird if all your black characters had blue eyes for no reason, and it's not for some fantastical reason. Maybe even a little bit, even if it was for a fantastical reason. But at least explore it. and be able to justify the decisions that you're making. That applies across the board to whatever you're creating. Just be able to justify your decisions as best as possible. I just don't want, especially given the type of series that I create with all this fantasy stuff happening, and all the other characters can have all these kind of colors for your eyes and the hairs, and I try to make sure that that goes across the board. But generally, even with black characters, I do tend to stay away from certain colors or like blue too often. But again, sometimes a blue-eyed black character might be appropriate for what you're doing. Just be cautious. I play a lot with like browns, blacks, hazels, greens, yellows, reds. I will use blue if it calls for it. Purple. At the end of the day, I want to make sure I'm having fun. Then this is the color I pick for the whites in the eyes and teeth. We apply these. Hopefully you guys already understand the basics of how to use Clip Studio Paint. If not, I have several videos on my YouTube channel, White Manga TV, WHYTMANGA TV. Coloring, shading, the highlights in the eyes, and all that good stuff. But when it comes to putting together a face for your character who's black, where they're undeniably black even without the skin tones, hopefully this video kind of helped. And then you can apply it along with all the other character design principles that exist to the characters that you are creating. Hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Thanks for having me. It's White Manga, and I'm out.